Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of Paint by Minis. And this week we're going to take a look at a pretty interesting paint, and we're going to use them to paint up some Necrons. Now these are Colourshift paints, and the general idea is that they will shift between one or two different tones of paint depending on where you look at the model. For example, this one is called Emerald Gateway by Green Stuff World, and it's a silver based paint that shifts between purple and green. So one thing I will say is that these paints can be brushed on, but ideally they will be airbrushed on. I find that it just goes on so much smoother. They're quite highly pigmented and have quite large metal flakes, so an airbrush would be the best way to get a good result. So the first thing I did was just get a black undercoat going on the model. The main reason this needs to be a black undercoat is the way that this paint is actually formulated. It's quite a thin layer and it needs that black undercoat to really show the contrast in the colours properly. If we did this over white, it would end up looking really flat and it would even look a bit patchy. So as we mentioned earlier, the first step is just spraying on the colour. You just want to take your time. It's a really translucent paint, so you really just want to build up these layers slowly. Usually I'd be airbrushing outside or just with the door open. You don't really want to breathe these fumes in, and if you don't have a proper extractor, you probably shouldn't really be spraying like I am, but just for the video purposes and to show you how I'm doing it, I thought I'd do it on camera here. So you'll have to excuse the camera, it's not picking up the full range of colours properly, but you definitely can see a few of the green tones and some of the purple tones showing through. It just makes a much more interesting silver. And with a model that is primarily silver, it really adds so much because it just breaks it up a lot more. So next up, just to add even more variation to the silver, we're going to do a Zenithal highlight of Heavy Metal by Metal and Alchemy scale colour. Again, we're just doing as much as we can to add more interest to what otherwise could be quite a flat silver colour. So just loading up a bit of the silver paint into the airbrush, we're just going to shoot from a majoritively 90-degree angle from the top of the model, just so that all of the highlight is directed at the very top of the model, leaving the Colourshift paint in the shadows. Again, the camera's not picking it up too well, but you can see the shadows are definitely darker, they've got more of the green Colourshift tone in them, and the top of the model is just a lot more silvery. It still has some of that Colourshift, but it's just a lot more subtle. So that's all the airbrushing done. Next up, we're just going to do a quick pass with some dry brushing just to really pick out the edges. The dry brushing is just super simple. We're going to use the same silver colour we used earlier and just going to make sure that we catch all of the edges. Next up, we're going to be painting black. We're going to use this to make the silver pop a lot more. You want to paint the gun black and any of the skeleton parts that are showing through the armour. So this is what we're looking like so far. As you can see, the silver looks really nice, really shiny, you can see the different tones in it, and the black really offsets it. Not only is it a much darker colour, so it lets the silver pop a lot more, but it's also matte, so it's not only a colour contrast, it's also a finish contrast. So admittedly, I kind of messed up a little bit here. I realised that I wanted the black to be dry brushed with the silver colour as well, to give it like a worn metal look. So this stage that we're dry brushing all of the black, you could really do this while you're dry brushing the silver of the armour as well. So with that little detour out of the way, we're going to move on to washing all of the black. We're going to use Nuln oil to do this for a couple of reasons. We want to dull back down that silver dry brush and make it look a lot more black, but we also want to make sure that it's more of a matte finish on the black rather than a shiny silver. So just take your time, work your way around the model and try not to let it pull too much. If you do notice it pulling, just use the brush to wick away a bit of the wash. So with all that done, we're now on to the final step of the model, which is the glowing effect of the Necron weapon. To do this, I use quite a simple method using white ink. So the first step is just to lay down a foundation of white ink into any of the recesses where you want the glow effect to go. So for me, I'm going to lay this into all of the gun, and I'm going to also lay this into his eyes. If you do get any white ink where you don't want it, just wipe it away quickly with your finger. So leave that white ink to dry a good long time. Personally, I left mine overnight. I find if I try to put anything over the white ink too quickly after it looking like it's dried, it's very easy to reactivate it and you'll mix colours and it will look terrible. So right here, all I'm doing is using Waywatcher Green. It's a GW glaze paint. If you have the new Tesseract Glow paint, I think it's called, you can use that instead. You basically just want a nice light green that you can apply over the white. And although you don't want a solid coat over this white, I did have to do 2 coats of this wayward green colour just to make sure that I was getting the vibrancy that I wanted. So just be careful with yours. Build up the layers slowly and just get the vibrancy that you want. So because the Waywatcher Green is a glaze colour and it's very thin, it will run into the recesses which colours them nicely, but the raised areas, like these little cores in the weapon, they'll be left a bit patchy because the Waywatcher Green hasn't applied to them correctly. So for this we'll just use some Moot Green to touch these up. So for the final highlight on the green glowing effect, we're going to use Flash Kit's yellow. I also mixed in a little bit of yellow ink just to boost the pigmentation of the yellow and make it easier to cover. Just take your time and go over a couple of layers. You want to make sure you're getting the cores in the weapon, the coils and the very dots in the eyes. So the final step is actually going back to the silver. I noticed that there's some dents and dings in the armour and they looked a bit weird without any shadow in them. So I went back over and using a gloss Agrax Earth shade, I just very gently shaded over the silver areas. Try extra hard not to let any of the wash pool on any of the bigger areas. If you do, again, just wick it off. You really just want this in the dents and dings and in the shadow areas. And because we're using a gloss Agrax Earth shade rather than a normal one, we're actually going to retain that glossy finish of the silver, so that's going to continue the contrast between the black and the silver. And with that last step, we are finished. I really hope you guys found this useful, and if you do end up painting your Necrons in this way, I'd love to see them. Again, this is just a really quick and easy scheme to do, using Colourshift paints to do most of the hard work for you. So the eagle eye amongst you might realise that we've left the base unfinished, so stick around and watch the next episode where I'll show you how I base my Necrons in a Mars based theme. Thanks again everyone, take care and I'll see you next time.